What I'm doing is the eulogy, but this will not be like a eulogy. Jim was born July 19th, 1934, in Macon, Georgia. He passed away on August 3rd, 2013. He is survived by 2 sons, Scott and Shane, 2 daughters, Sherry and Karen, and his wife, Colleen. We'd like to also honor Helen, who's with us today. Jim graduated from Glendale High School in the Los Angeles area in 1952, served as a policeman for a time, served in the U.S. Army, graduated from Southern California College, went on, got his teaching credentials from the University of Oregon. His first coaching job, first position, was at Canyonville Christian, then CVA. When Jim arrived at CCA, he was working on his degree at the University of Oregon. He came to my father and said, "I would like to coach your kids in track." And Dad was always happy for any help he could get and said, "Sure." And Jim was commuting back and forth from Eugene to Canyonville every day in 1961. The first team that Jim coached won the district championship and broke virtually every school record that CCA had at that time. The second team that Jim coached was the cross-country team the next fall in 1962. Ed Smeltzer was the #1 guy on the team, and Dave Morfin, sitting there in the back, was on the team, as was myself. At the time Jim came to CCA, our trophy case had 1 athletic trophy in the case. Okay. If you were there this morning, school started in 1924. It's now 1961. We've got 1 trophy. The trophy was for the consolation win at the Southern Oregon Invitational Basketball Tournament in 1952. Everywhere Jim coached, they had success. He coached at Canyonville, he coached at Eagle Point, coached at Medford, coached at South Umpqua, coached at Southern Oregon University, Mount San Antonio College, in the Los Angeles area. Jim coached was an individual coach to 3 athletes who competed in the Olympic Games for Taiwan, Singapore, and the Philippines. The reason I wanted to do this is most of the time, most of us live pretty ordinary lives. We're born, we go to school, we get a job, perhaps get married, and so on. But Jim did some things that were not what most of us accomplished. I just mentioned that he coached 3 Olympians, coached at multiple colleges, won many, many championships, high school teams that he coached at. One of the things that Jim did was, a couple of years into college, he and I sat down and had a conversation about starting a track publication, statistics for the state of Oregon high schools. And we did that, it went on for a number of years, and it's still continuing today. It's been taken over by other individuals. But the interesting part of the story is that this was a paper book that we did annually, and a few years ago, one of Jim's athletes, another life that Jim touched, a boy from New Hope Christian School in Grants Pass, who's great in computers, started doing this on the internet. And it very quickly went from the Oregon Internet Who's Who to the national internet who's who. And if you go to the website, it's athletic.net. If you're a track fan and you're interested, I would highly recommend it. On the homepage, it says they now are posting statistics for every high school, every college in the United States in stats for 4.5 million athletes. Jim started that. One of his athletes, who was a state champ for Jim at New Hope, has carried that idea on. One of my favorite Crumpton stories that not everybody's heard is the Track and Field Congress, TAC, of the United States was controlled by an individual by the name of Olin Cassell. Olin Cassell, for a euphemism, was a jerk.
Can you be a little clearer about
He was really not doing a good job for track and field in the United States. And Jim said, let's fix it. And he went back to the national convention and he ran against Olin Cassell. Now, he was a coach that nobody had heard of. And he just came in with an idea. We want to do what's best for track and field, and let's get rid of Olin. And he came this close to knocking off a guy who'd been an Olympic champion who had been head of track and field for a number of years. Another thing Jim did was, after he had some success at the college level, he was the #2 college coach in the United States at SCC. After that success, he was invited by the State Department of the United States. It was funded and sponsored by the U.S. State Department to go to foreign countries to give clinics, coaching clinics, not to athletes, but to teach their coaches how to coach their athletes and improve the level of track and field in their countries. From the contacts that he made with the State Department came the idea for, why don't you bring American athletes to compete in our country? Would you be interested in bringing a track team or a basketball team to compete in just a friendly international meeting? And Jim took that idea and started small the first couple of years, and then it gathered steam. And at least he said 15,000 athletes. A tremendous number of athletes went to many, many countries all over the world. And the kids that were involved in the program had this great experience of travel and competing against kids from other countries. But just think about that for a second. 15,000 kids. Each one of those kids had to have a uniform and had to have an airplane itinerary, hotels to stay in, and the meets scheduled, and the 100 things that had to be done to make that happen. That's a tremendous influence on a number of people. Can I keep going? When Jim was at CCA, my dad was always after him. Jim, missed you at church this Sunday. He was not the most faithful church goer of all time, but Jim had a faith that went to his core, and that's who he was. And I remember one time when I was with Jim and another coach in a car. We had to go somewhere, and Jim, it's probably the #1 coach in the state of Oregon. And Jim knew, this guy had run for Jim at Southern Oregon University. And he made his living running a tavern in addition to being a school teacher. An interesting combination. And Jim turned the conversation around to where, how's it going spiritually? You guys, you take your family to church, and by the end of this, it was almost an altar call. And Jim, most of us aren't real comfortable, or I'm not. Steve is, but Jim, with his faith, he shared his faith from time to time, and influenced some lives like Mr. Hopkins here, and changed lives. I'll tell you two things Jim told me that changed the way I think a little bit. I remember riding, I think it was riding to the state track meet to take Orphan up there to run the mile up at Bend. And we were just talking, and that was 1963, and this is 2014, that's 50 years ago. And I remember that conversation. It changed the way I think. Jim said, hey, could you run a 5-minute mile? I said, well, yeah, I've done that a couple times. And he said, well, if you can do that, and you do some training, and you train hard, and you train smart, don't you think you could knock a few seconds off and run a 4:55? Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, then why can't you run 4:55 and then do 3 or 4 months of training, put in some hard work, and run a 4:50? And it's like, well, where does this end? But he had my attention, and I was thinking, and for the next many years, I continued running even after my time running in high school was done. But what he said, another thing that he said as part of that, was that almost all of us have a lot more ability and talent than we think we do. It's like, maybe you think you could run a mile in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. But when you get to 4:45 and then you do the work, then it goes to 4:40. And then it becomes, well, he ultimately coached guys that broke 4 minutes in the mile, and guys that won national championships in the high jump. But occasionally Jim would throw something like that into a conversation with an athlete that made us think, opened our eyes to possibilities, and inspired us to become not just better athletes, but maybe better
people. Doug Wead is the president of CCA. He's also the chairman of the board of directors. He is also one of Coach Crumpton's athletes, and he's going to come and share some things now. So, Doug Wead.
Hello, everybody. And CBA is still going strong. We sent a team to state, basketball team. We didn't do that when I was here back in '63, but they sent a team this year to the state playoffs, and they won district champs, weren't they, in track this year? Soccer. And they competed at state in soccer, and they won the national championship for stock market contest. That's the money, Of course, there's more money in basketball probably than there is in the stock market. But that's Roger Shafer's. I told Roger we ought to try to get a reality show, because they've got these kids coming from communist countries and from Rwanda and People's Republic of China and Korea and Brazil and Russia, and having all these kids in his classroom learning the American stock market and winning national championship. That would be a great. And then we've got the people here trying to talk to atheists about the Lord, and I think it'd make a great reality show. You'd have everybody involved. I wish Jim were here to see this. I think he would be just delighted, and maybe he would just was reminded, as I sit back looking at this crowd, I thought, wow, how did Crumpton do that? I mean, and I was reminded of Yogi Berra's quote. Remember, he said, always attend other people's funerals or otherwise they will come to yours. So, Jim must have attended a lot of funerals. Memorials, never. Anyway, here we are. And I guess this illustrates how if you live a life for other people, or you're training or coaching other people, then it will resonate and it will live on beyond you, because that's how he lived his life. He was a coach. He liked being a coach, and he was a life coach, and he was a sports coach, and he gave us what we needed, the pieces we needed. I wasn't a big shot on the team, on the track team, but I was the hurdler, and I was the only hurdler. So even though I wasn't expected to do very well, he still gave me everything I needed to know. He'd have me watch these films. It was one night in the auditorium when we were showing some of the old Olympic films that I saw this Olympic hurdler, and I noticed, I counted the number of steps he took to the first hurdle, and I thought, hey, I'm just a kid in high school, and I'm only 2 steps off from him, and I thought something must be wrong. And so I went out by the track, and I had someone help me. We set up the hurdles, and I ran to the first hurdle and then went back and actually counted the footsteps. And I realized that I was off. I wasn't 2, I was 3. And so all I did was change positions in the blocks. I just moved, I started with the other foot. And I ran to the first hurdle, and it felt so smooth. I thought, wow. And I realized that I had been, I don't know what the word would be for it, but I had been double stepping before I got to that first hurdle. It had to have slowed me down. I wasn't running naturally and smoothly. I had never spotted it if he hadn't have showed us the movie. And why show it to me? Because I wasn't even in the running in the hurdles. And I was possibly going to come in 3rd in the high hurdles, but he showed it to me because that's, he's a coach. It's you coach everybody. You ride the train to the end of the station. So I had those pieces. The problem was there were no more track meets except the district. So there was no utility for me. There was no way to use this. We had one more big practice, and we used it, and I used it. I started with the other foot. I didn't even tell him this. And he clocked it. He said, wow, I said, that's the best time you've ever had. This was in the lower ones. I said, wow, that's... So I had a good feeling going in district. And sure enough, I won district. It was upset because nobody expected me to win it. It never would have happened. I wouldn't have believed it or anticipated or planned for it or rehearsed for it or practiced for it. But he's the coach, and the coach gives you all the pieces you need, and you fail or succeed on your own. And he was a policeman, remember that. I remember in the dorm, we just had, my son here is the dean now, Joshua Wead. We have 4 men's deans now. We had 130 students this year in full pay. You know, in 1995, we closed our doors, and Roger, who's a genius with money, was running this place on a rubber band and scotch tape and a shoestring. And he was squeezing a dime. He's very skilled, very talented at that. I think at the time we were paying our teachers, shoot me dead, $500 a month. But they also got their meals. Wasn't that something like that, Ellen? And $2,500 would buy you the room, board, and tuition for a year, which basically covered the food and our electric bill. Now we charge $25,000 or more, and we're full and overflowing, so it's booming. So it's Jim would be proud, happy to see athletes coming from all over the world. He took it to the world. Now the world's coming back here, but his his investment in other people. But he was a policeman, they said, and we had somebody stealing money in the dorm. And he, remember Larry and Wes, he coated the money with some kind of chemical or something. And so when they touched it, they got this stuff on their hands. And then he put the light overhead, all this come, tested the light. He found the he found the culprit. So he was bigger than life. We thought this guy, you know, he was like Kojak before Kojak, and so he was the sole authority. Our life and death was in his hands, and he was the dean, and he ruled. And he couldn't go to Mama. There was nobody but him, and he was the final authority. And sometimes it was scary. But he ruled with an iron hand. I remember when we had the first run, he made us run. I was the best shape in my life under Jim Crumpton, and I hated him for it. But I like it in retrospect. I've always liked it. But I remember when we first ran, he got us out there. We're going to run the 2.5. I go on, I'm diligent. And I think, okay, I'm going to do this right. And I was instantly corrupted by Ken McAdams, who was my friend, who was running with us. I said, you're not going to do this, are you? Well, we're running, you know, we're jogging. Are you kidding me? You're not going to go 2.5 miles. You're going to be kidding me. You're not going to do this. That was music to my ear. Ken was just kind of like the devil on my shoulder over here. So I was hearing it, and I was quick to comply. So, yeah, you got any other ideas? What do you well, I would just cut across. See, look, there's Eddie John right now. It's on the other side. So just, all we have to do is climb over this fence, run across the interstate, get on the other side. It sounded, you know, the shortest distance between 2 points. It sounded like that could work, but believe me, it was a long way. It would have been a whole lot easier to run the 2.5 when we got caught anyway, which multiplied the 2.5. So, and you had to run 300 miles to be on the basketball team. I didn't do it, and I wasn't on the basketball team, and I was good. But Jim was not perfect. He was sometimes wrong. I remember we had a music director then, and I won't mention his name. I hope he's here. I wish if he is here. I've emailed him, tried to get him to come here, but his initials were Grant Ford. And I remember, so I remember Jim saying, you know, I really like him. He's the first music director I've worked with in a long time who wasn't gay. Only we didn't use the word gay back then. So, and I thought, how interesting. I never thought much about it until 30 years later. I get a Newsweek magazine, and there they're talking about the Gay Pride Parade in Chicago, and the chairman was Grant Ford. So I thought, hey, Jim, you missed it. Grant was real manly, so Jim thought he had him picked. So Jim Crumpton wasn't perfect. But he was a great coach. And my favorite story with Crumpton in the dorm was the only time I got him. It's the only time I got him, and I kept it secret for years. I didn't even dare tell him until the statute of limitations was totally passed. But I was in charge of emptying the trash, and we had a trash can, and it was a nice job. It wasn't that tough, and I'd take the trash can out in the back, and then I'd dump it out. And every evening, that was basically the deal. There were 2 trash cans, and it allowed me to go from room to room and stay a little bit later while everybody else, you know, had to be in their rooms with lockdown. So I would empty the trash, and I started noticing as I was emptying the trash that it seemed like somebody was taking a leak in the trash can, or they were throwing away orange sodas or something. So I remember thinking, I think that, so I told the coach, and what? You know, so he immediately issued orders, you know, if this happens again, there will be trouble. So, well, it kept happening. So I said to the coach, it's still happening. So he said, all right. So he got everybody, and he lined us all up in the hall, and he had this meeting, and he went through a number of items that he and his trustee, Eddie John, you know, and Wes Bishop, and Larry Jones. Weren't you one of the trustees, Larry? Kind of? Yeah. So it's like the concentration camp, some of the Jews that used to. So, to police the others. So, Larry was one. Anyway, he and Eddie John, they issued their instructions, and then finally God himself would come out of his apartment and would pass down his word to us. So his word that night was in my defense. You would say, now somebody's taken a leak in the trash can, and it's not going to happen again. And if it happens again, you're all going to get on the bus, and I'm going to drive you out to, I don't know, the towns around here. And I'm going to drop you off, and you're going to run back. So he knew we hated to run. So that would be the punishment. I got to thinking about that. I thought, boy, that would really be a kick. It would be real disruptive, you know. We'd be out in the middle of the night, we'd be running back that long distance. Well, we'd probably get out of school the next day. I mean, how can you make a kid go to school when he hadn't slept all night? And I thought, that might be kind of a cool thing. I mean, what he thought was punishment, or what he meant for evil, you know, God meant for good. So so I didn't lie. I was just kind of like Bill Clinton. I didn't tell him everything. I said, Coach. He said, what? I pointed at the trash can and I threw some Kool-Aid or something there. And he said, all right, that's it. And he got everybody out. Do you remember that night, Larry? Did you know this story I'm telling you, how it really happened?
Yeah.
You did?
Out to Days Creek when I was
Yeah, but you didn't know nobody really peed in the trash can. It was Kool-Aid. So he got us all on the bus and he hauled it out to Days Creek and he dropped us off and we had to run back. And I was doing pretty good. I got started and I thought, you know, it's the middle of the night and this is pretty good. And, you know, they're probably going to let us sleep in the morning and go to school late, which would be just worth it. And we're out of the dorm and we're free in the night air, and poor coach, I don't know where Ellen was at that time, but the coach was driving back and forth in his car trying to keep track of us, so it was probably more punishment to him than us. And I was doing pretty good, and I wasn't a distance runner like Eddie John and Wes and the others. I can run upstairs right now and fall over dead. I mean, so I just wasn't, I didn't have that stamina. I had fast beats, spurts of speed like Gallagher did. But is Gallagher here? Is Gallagher alive? But anyway, so I was doing pretty good, and here came the devil, Ken McAdams. And he said, you're not telling me that you're going to run back. I said, well, yeah, we're doing pretty good. The coach is driving right now. If he catches us, he says, oh, don't. You've got to be kidding me. How many miles it is? And you realize what time in the morning we're going to get back? I said, you can't do that. Let's stop and get it to telephone. I'll call one of my friends from town. He'll come out and pick us up. I'd say, no, I'm doing pretty good. And he was the only one I could talk to at the end of the line back there. And when he stopped, I finally stopped because I'd have been all alone. And then when I stopped, we got way behind. I thought, oh, we'll never catch up. So sure enough, we went off to this house, and we went into it, and this house, I cannot describe. This house we got in, it was loaded with trash. It was like, I mean, it looked like dishes were like 8 years old with pieces of egg and toast on them. And one old man, and he looked like he was a serial killer. It was really spooky. And that's the house we wandered into, way out here somewhere. The guy hadn't had a haircut in 1,000 years, and there were cats, and who knows what else was living under the papers. And so we asked if he had a telephone. He had a telephone somewhere around, and he was kind of grunting noises and everything. I was really freaked out, and the devil was just happy. And he got to the telephone, and he called his buddy from town. Buddy came out from town eventually. It seemed like forever, and my heart was, you know, because we were having to wait at this serial killer's house for this guy to pick us up. He finally came out, and we got a ride. And on the way, I'm saying to Ken McAdams, look, the coach is not a dummy. He is a smart guy. Do not try to come running in at the head of the pack. you come in at the end of the pack or the back in the middle of the worst part and come in then. So the guy from the city dropped us off at the top of the hill, and I said, don't go out with the leaders. So we're waiting a little while, we don't hear anything, and then here he comes, Eddie John. Here he comes, the workhorse, this war horse. He's leading the pack, and the coach is timing the whole thing. And then there's Wes Bishop and a couple of the others. And Ken McAdams, so help me, he says, I'm going. I said, Jim, don't, the coach is going to know, you can't. But he runs off. It was his chance to to have earned glory, to be listed in the top 10. And so off he runs. I wisely and astutely waited till it was deep in the middle, and then I ran down with the pack and we finished. So that was our torturous evening, which was really kind of fun. But he was a great coach. That's the only time I got him. And I didn't tell him for a long time. And I'm a little nervous telling him now. I'm telling you now. So, but I loved him, and look at the impact he had on lives. Look at the impact that we could have on lives if we take the time to coach somebody. Everybody keeps all their secrets, and coach and people who influence others are giving them all away. Everything they learn, everything they pick up, we're quick to pass it on. And some of the rest of us come along and pick up those little pieces and do things with them, and they change our lives. So what a great man he is, what a great life he lived, and this was a perfect place for him to practice his gifts right here at CCA. So God bless you, Jim.